Folks, welcome to the Inside Carolina podcast the day after. I'm your host, Tommy Ashley. That's Buck Sanders and Jason Staples. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com.
Hmm.
All right, boys, a little after 8:02 on the East Coast in the morning. Going to see how many people trickle in here on an unadvertised day after podcast live. Doing it primarily because I don't like dealing with uploading to YouTube because it's gotten to be a chore the way YouTube seems to want to act. But Buck Sanders, 27-24 in a game against the Miami Hurricanes that, quite frankly, other than the location, was pretty much the exact same game that Carolina played against the Hurricanes last season. Your overall thoughts?
Well, except neither one of them scored that amount of points. It was like 20 points more each, but it was a 3-point game, so it was a little different. Um, you know, I would think that people should feel good this morning. North Carolina was a 4-point dog in Miami. They come away with the win. They're leading the Coastal. They're 5-1. I don't know. It's probably just me. I don't know if it's just me or not, but possibly it could be. I don't feel all that good about this game. I have some reservations. I'd like to see the defense continue to get better. I thought they were a little better in this game, although 500 yards, that's what we're talking about here. We're giving up 537 yards and calling a good defensive game. I have trouble with that. And I've heard everybody say today, most people saying, it was a win by the defense. The defense won the game. And you give up 537 yards. I guess that's the world we're living in these days, but still, they were great against the run. You got to give them that. 1.8 yards per carry. And that's the decision that they made. And we were just talking about this, I think, maybe the last time we gathered here. Or maybe it was after the Notre Dame game. North Carolina had to decide what they're going to be good at. One side of the, they got to be good against the run or good against the pass. They got to make a call, to be good against one or the other. And it looks like they've made that decision. They're going to try to be good against the run. If you count the jack position on the defensive line, which I do, North Carolina had 9 different defensive linemen to get at least one tackle in that game yesterday. And so they've got the bodies up front, I guess they feel like, and some good tacklers at linebacker to pull it off, to shut down the run. And Gene Chizik was as aggressive yesterday as I've ever seen him defensively, as far as blitzing and sending extra players, run blitzes. But bottom line, I wish I would feel better about this. I think I should feel better. I don't know what's stopping me from feeling better, but that was a tight ball game. Come away with a 3-point win, and it came down to essentially the last play by Miami when they threw that pick. So here we are.
Pessimistic Buck. I'm not used to seeing it. It is the world we live in when Tommy's the positive one of the bunch. This is I've heard I'm a lot happier since last Friday, a week ago. So maybe this is part of it. Jason, I know you're going through a lot this morning. I'm dealing with a lot, sports related. But let's stick to the Carolina version here. Almost 500 yards to Tyler Van Dyke, but only gave up 24 points. That's some impressive. You got to work really hard to give up 500 yards passing and only give up 24 points. What did they do? What did they do that surprised you? What did they do? You agreed with Buck on when he was talking about stopping the run and picking a side and all that stuff. But how was Gene Chizik's crew managed or able to manage to do that?
Well, number one is 1.8 yards per carry given up. I mean, that's pretty straightforward.
Other than Virginia Tech, have they ever done that?
Not this year. They did it against Virginia was it last year?
Yeah, not this year though.
Yeah,
the Virginia stat line last year is almost identical to this one, if you remember.
Yeah.
But this was average per sack adjusted rush average 2.5 yards a carry. That's the difference. And really where that manifested the most was down on the goal line when they got a goal line stand where Miami ran it like 7-8 times in a row from inside the 5-yard line and couldn't penetrate the defensive front, couldn't get in there. And then finally, gave up on it and ran play action on fourth down, and Carolina completely expected play action there. Good job by the staff, and wound up getting the stop. That's the ball game. That goal line stand was the ball game, it turned out.
And they took it 99 yards the other way after that stop.
That's
right.
That
was the ball game.
That sequence right there was the ball game. That's the difference in the game. Normally, you give up that many plays inside your 5, and you're gonna end up giving up a touchdown. And this game winds up being what, 31-27, something like that. I mean, there's your difference. So what they did is exactly what Buck said. Is they decided we're gonna stop at least one thing, and we know what this team wants to do. They knew that Cristobal and Gaddis, they knew what they want to do. And they also knew that, Miami's going to have some problems with drops once in a while. They're going to have some mistakes out of that wide receiver crew. And they got a few choice ones in good situations. But that was the strategy. This is a team that offensively, and we talked about it yesterday in WCHL pregame, Tommy. I said this. You asked me what has to happen for them to win. I said if they hold them under 100 or under 100 yards and they run for 100 yards, probably win the game. Well, they ran for 161, 3.7 yards per carry, and I said over 3.5 yards per carry, over 100 yards, you probably win the game. You hold Miami under 100 yards rushing, you probably win the game. That's what they came in as a coaching staff with exactly that mindset. Got to be balanced enough on offense, and then just force Miami to be consistent in the passing game, consistent enough to score. Because they'll move the ball, but maybe they make a mistake, six plays into the drive. Maybe they drop that key ball. That said, like Buck said, there are concerns coming out of this game. I mean, you look at the big plays. Miami had 14 big plays, all in the running game. All in the passing game, that is. None in the running game. 14 big plays. And North Carolina had 10 big plays, 4 rushing, 6 passing. So the thing about Miami's big plays is none of them were over 41 yards. So, that was the sort of difficult missed assignment with Jalen Knighton down the sideline, where you had him running ahead of Gray, and Gray was expecting a little bit of help from the secondary there. But all in all, you give up a bunch of big plays, but none of them are all that long. None of them are touchdown, back-breaking big plays. You make them earn it. And with this Miami offense, if you make them earn it, they might just have a little trickle of substance going down their leg. And they knew it. So that's what they did. That's how they won this game. Was, they played a little bit of red zone roulette and they won. They did their job, and this was the best the defensive line has looked all year. And I think that's what people are actually talking about when they say this is defense. And it's been so long since we've seen anything like that on the defensive line from Carolina that people are mistaking that for good defense. Right? It's like, whoa, so that's what a defensive line's supposed to do. So it's definitely not a complete defensive effort, but win and move on, baby. I mean, this is a win, and that's against a good FCS program. So, I mean, you take that every time, and you don't want it to be that close. I don't think that game should have been that close. end of the first half, they very nearly lost that football game with some bad decisions. But 5-1 and in the driver's seat in the Coastal. And you look at the rest of the Coastal, you don't see anybody else that should beat this team. I mean, I think Wake Forest is by a good sight the best team left on the schedule. So now the whole rest of the season opens up, and you got a shot at, a legit shot at a 10-win season. So, you got to be feeling pretty good about that, regardless of, concerns about this or that. You don't want this game to be as close as it was, but hey, if you allow a team that isn't quite as good as you to hang around for just a little too long, that team might just come out and beat you at the very end somehow if you make enough mistakes. So you don't want that to happen. But overall, you'll just walk away with a win, and you'll say, all right, next game, can we improve this other thing that we're not doing quite as well?
You and the Noel fan base certainly knows about your last point. That would have made a day almost perfect yesterday. Buck, I think the one thing that I was most impressive about, and a lot of people say the defense stinks and all that, and we can discuss that, but Carolina was not sharp on offense throughout. Now, Drake May made some ridiculous plays in the first half, but the second half, they had some moments, but Carolina was able to win the grinder game. And I'm going to do this. Shout out to Nia Satterfield-Brown in the WCHL pregame show. For one, she said DeAndre Boykins was going to be key, and obviously he was. For two, she thought it would be 28-24, I think is what she picked, in a low-scoring game because she didn't think Carolina's offense would be on point against Miami. Those are my takeaways. Carolina was able to win an ugly football game. And, judging from what we've seen a lot, that just hadn't been the case for Mac Brown 2.0 too many times. And I think that part of it gives hope for the rest of the season for sure. What do you think there?
You have any wood?
You broke up on me.
Wood is
you got some mic, but you got some mic issues.
It sounds like your mic connection's off a little bit, Buck.
I had the same issues. Jason, what's the biggest stat? While Buck's fixing that, what's the biggest stat in this game other than the rush yards?
Oh, that's a good question. Thinking about this, I think runs stuffed percentage. That might be it. But again, you asked for other than the rushing. I don't like seeing the big play, the deep passing numbers from Miami. They were 6 for 11 on deep passing. So that's something that needs.
There we go. Huh?
Oh, now you're through the computer.
You hear me now?
Now you're through your computer, but that's fine. Let's go.
Are you hearing me now? No.
I can hear you.
You're through the computer.
Okay.
And this is live, so everything that can happen live does happen live. And I don't know how to fix that. It is. Hold on. Let me see if I can fix that one.
Yeah.
What about that right there? We're still doing the day after podcast.
Here's another favorite one, though. Third down. Here's the other one. You asked for another. What's the other stat? It's third down percentage. That's the other stat. Looking at this, at one point, Miami, I think, was 1 for 10 on third down.
So they went 4 for 4 in their last.
But you look at, they were 35.7 on third down, and that's with the end of the game. They marched it down a couple times, but yeah, they let's see, they were first half. They weren't 1 for 10. They were 3 of 8 in the first half, and then second half they were Well,
that's
first half.
2 of 6.
No, I'm sorry. First half they were. Where is this? 2 of 6 and then 3 of 8. So that third down percentage, getting off the football field was key. 2 of 6 and 3 of 8. Oh no, that was last night. That was NC State that was 1 for 10 on third down at one point. Still managed to win that game.
Let's don't go there. But we got
Yeah.
you back in here. It's always fun doing them live. I'd rather do them live than have to worry about doctoring it up. You like that, didn't you, Jason? But what were you saying there? I think you mentioned Caleb Hood when you were having a little bit of mic issues. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, Caleb Hood, could you hear me okay, by the way?
Yep, gotcha.
Caleb Hood, I think, seized the day yesterday and has emerged as a leader of the clubhouse, but a lead dog in the running back room. And what was really impressive, I thought, about him was not just the way he ran the ball. I think he got like 5.7 yards per carry, something like that. But he also caught the ball well, had 5 catches for 50 yards. So having a back that can do both, that can run the ball and catch the ball, as long as he can pass protect, the defense has no clue what you're going to do with the ball. They don't know if you're going to run, throw, what you're going to do. So I thought his emergence yesterday against a decent Miami defensive line. Jason probably say for an FCS team, they have a really good defensive line. But I thought Caleb Hood was a real bright spot for the offense. And even though, and this may be an example of how statistics can lie, but Drake May had a better QBR and pass efficiency rating than Tyler Van Dyke did by points or a few points each way. So he threw the ball a lot less. He threw the ball half as much as Tyler Van Dyke. And he made a couple of mistakes on the picks, of course. But the offense, I don't think, was as bad as it looked at times. I mean, they obviously put enough points on the board to win. But besides that, I think we're used to seeing, 45 points, 50 points, whatever. And in this case, didn't see that many. So something's obviously wrong with the offense. But the offense did enough to win, I think. And that number might shock some people that Drake May's numbers were better than Tyler Van Dyke's.
At least on ratings, yeah. May 19 for 28, 309, 2 and 2. Van Dyke 42 of 57 for 496, 3 and 1. I mean, Van Dyke almost threw for his season total. I think he had like 800 yards on the season. I told the Miami crowd before, went on the Big O show down there in pregame, and I said a number, and they, you talking about a fan base that was down on their team. But a number that they should remember is that Carolina's defense has given up Heisman-level performances to
everybody
except the Virginia Tech quarterback, and they weren't buying it. They were like, "Oh no, there's no way Van Dyke does this." He was fantastic again. I do think the pressure got to him at times. But Jason, I want to ask you something that has sort of been a burr in my saddle watching this Carolina defense. And yes, they made the big plays to win. Miami made a conscious effort to prevent Carolina's tight ends, I thought, from having huge games. I mean, you got Morales with 2 catches, Nesbitt with 1 for 21 and 22 yards apiece. But Will Mallory, who everybody talked about as one of the best tight ends in the nation, certainly in the ACC, just like the fella for Notre Dame, 8 for 115 on 10 targets. Can you help me understand what is it about Gene Chiswick's defense, or really any college defense, that prevents manning up, doing whatever you have to do on the tight end? Because Mallory, like the Notre Dame TE, was running free quite a bit. Now, he did have a huge drop, but he was wide open most of the time, 8 for 115. What's going on there when you look at Gene Chizik's defense and Carolina's personnel against those type plays and players?
Well, it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that in some respects, but the main thing that Miami did to get him open is they ran a lot of what's called the mesh concept. This is actually something Phil Longo runs a lot. It's an air raid concept that every team that has a little bit of air raid in it will use, and a lot of teams that don't run the air raid now use. And what you have is you have players usually from either the slot or the tight end on each side of the line of the offensive line are going to run. They're each going to run shallow crosses. Now this violates, the way that teams used to call a lot of things in games where you don't want players in the same. You don't want to run your receivers in the same zone. Well, mesh does that on purpose to turn it into a pick, essentially. So it's not a pick if both players are just running their routes, right? And the way that you coach it is actually each player, they're supposed to slap hands as they go by each other. Now, this you can defend it a few different ways, but it's trickier if you're in more of a man coverage. And Carolina was in man a decent amount, or in man match concepts, at least in this game. And so if you man up on the tight end there, you're getting screened off, essentially. It's hard to stick with the tight end, or it's hard to stick with the receiver or whoever's coming from the other side, or both, because in each case you're chasing, and in each case you may just run into the wrong person. So, and that happened a few times in this game. They used a lot of pick concepts on Carolina once they realized Carolina was playing aggressively in terms of, their match principles and really following guys. And they tried to screen out the linebackers a lot in this game. That's something they just did a lot of. So, getting little wheel or rail routes to the running backs, getting Mallory in situations where he would make either on mesh or some other concept, sort of rub one of those defenders, and that's really hard to stop when you're doing that sort of thing. So to stop that, you have to give up some other things, and that's what makes it tricky. Sounds like you got a dog going there.
Yep. Oh, the squeaky toy.
Yep, squeaky toy.
But
This
is hilarious.
I love live.
I do too.
But the thing that you can do is you can try to zone that a little bit. And so you pass off, you have to communicate, in, and and you're switching off responsibilities and all that. But then that requires a lot of communication. And if a guy doesn't come off in just the right spot, now you've got a guy that's sitting wide open or potentially running free. So, modern offensive football is tough to compete against. And, when you're defensively going to say, okay, we're going to match coverage, but we're going to play with a little bit of cushion, and then we're going to bring pressure. The space that's going to be there is that sort of short to intermediate space where the tight end is naturally working. And at that point, you're just basically saying, okay, that's the thing we'll give you a little more of, but we're going to come up and make the tackle, and you're going to have to execute over and over and over again. And sometimes we'll take that away. You can't just count on it. So, and that's what they did. So that didn't bother me too much to see Mallory have the success that he did at different points. You have to give certain things up on defense. Every defense has something that the offense can take advantage of, unless you just beat the brakes off of them up front. And Carolina's not dominant enough on the defensive line to just take everything away. So, you have to decide what you're willing to give them. And that was what they were willing to give a little bit of in this game. And I think it was the right decision.
I don't know. It looked like Gio Biggers was running through traffic, like reminded me like he's trying to cross 95 out here to chase Mallory a lot. And he was open. And like I said, I think that's something they need to clean up. But to your point, you got to give up something. Buck, give me something on the defensive end aside from choosing, stopping the run or whatever. Who stood out for you? I thought Power Eccles was everywhere yesterday.
He was, and of course, we already talked a little bit about DeAndre Boykins, but I think he's an emerging star at nickel. He's helping out a lot. He's upgraded the defense from last year at that position. Early on, if you were paying attention, Keyshawn Silver was making some plays. In the second quarter, he came up big, I think, in that goal line stand a couple of times. And there are other guys you can mention on the defensive line, but they played so many of them that for one guy to stand out is not as easy, I don't think, when you're playing 9 as opposed to playing 5. But defensively, I would say DeAndre Boykins, although I will say, and I'm not the only one that's going to make this observation by any means, but Cedric Gray has a knack for making a big play. Knocking the ball out, a strip, forced fumble, and, just the stop that he made, keep preventing the guy from going out of bounds near the end of the game. That might have won the ball game for him. Because the guy had to run, they had to hustle the offense back out there. Did they not have a down? They could have spiked the ball maybe, and
I thought it was third. I thought that was third down. I thought they could have spiked it, but
yeah, but then they would have been concerned given Tyler Van Dyke's pass that he would have tried to spike it on 4th down too. So,
man, the shade is heavy.
I'm not sure why they didn't spike the ball there. Maybe they had a good reason. I'm not sure, but preventing that guy from going out of bounds was big. I mean, because they made them rush things, and that's basically how Boykins came up with the interception. I think is they were just too rushed. So Gray, he's imperfect. He's not a perfect linebacker. He makes mistakes, and I think probably even all of us make mistakes from time to time. But he has a knack for making a big play. So
I thought Des Evans also stood out in this game. There are a couple of the penalties down there at one point that drew some attention, but I thought Des Evans played really well in this game.
Yeah, he did. I mean, he's got to keep he's always doing that stiff arm bull rush and getting his hand up in there. Who knows when they'll call it or whatever, but I thought Evans, but Eccles and Gray, to Buck's point about Cedric Gray, I mean, you have a leader of the defense. You have a guy that's in on pretty much every play, but I don't know if the normal watcher of the game, certainly people that are watching this podcast, and Buck mentioned it, the play to hold the Miami guy in bounds, and I'll freely admit I was yelling at the TV saying, "Roll the clock, run the clock, run the clock." That's some heads up football, and we see a lot of guys making dumb plays, but we got to give a double shout out to making a play that just is that's a big brain play right there that Gray made. Can you speak to the growth that you saw, if any, on the Carolina defensive side in terms of those type plays, making the smart play, not making silly mistakes that's cost this team a lot? Because I kept waiting for a bad penalty. I kept waiting for this and that, the old kick dog mantra. But I thought Carolina was decently clean in that aspect and needed every bit of it.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, the reason that Gray has made so many of those big plays in key situations over the years is because he's such a smart player. Gray is you can see him, he processes really quickly, and he's an athlete, he's a good athlete, but really the thing that he brings to the table more than anything else, and the reason he played early last year, is that he's just a really smart player. But I think defensively, the thing that I noticed the difference of the most were two things. One is I thought the defensive line played with good pad level, really for the first time with any sort of consistency all season. I mean, y'all know I've been harping on that as like you can't be successful on defense with playing with these fundamentals on defensive line. And I've been showing example after example of like, this is not it. This is not it. And then the last couple weeks, I've shown examples of, all right, well, we saw one. That play, they did it right. And then over here they didn't do it right, but we're seeing like a little bit of growth. And then this game, all of a sudden, it was more consistent. It was like, oh, okay, yeah, you know what? That play, I just saw 3 guys play with appropriate pad level, proper 1-2, steps off the ball, directing the line of scrimmage, that sort of thing. And along with that, I saw the defense doing a lot more of guys just doing their job instead of peeking and trying to, on the defensive line, peeking into the backfield, standing up to try to see where the ball's going, backers, kind of in the wrong space and all that. It looked to me like this team bought in a good bit more defensively in terms of just doing what they're supposed to do, doing their job rather than trying to make a play. Now, there are a few missed assignments here and there. There are a few places where guys, got their eyes in the wrong spot and all that. And, that happens to most teams most Saturdays. But all in all, I thought the real growth was watching guys handle their business and hold their water a good bit more with their eye discipline and with just overall assignment soundness in this game. That I thought was the biggest thing. And so that's not a single individual in terms of, making smart plays or whatever. That's the whole unit on defense deciding to play more within what they're asked to do. And I think that marks some good growth.
Yeah, one thing, and Buck, you can share what you think about what I'm about to say. I think one thing that I've heard you talk about all year, the technique issues and the fundamental issues and all, I've wondered, could those be cleaned up during season? And it seems like maybe. I guess they have been. Buck, did you see things that, to Jason's point, were cleaned up in this game? Obviously, the defensive line needs some pressure, and they're getting their hands up. Somebody, Jamil Taylor in the chat, mentioned that. They did it at the very beginning of the Notre Dame game, and then they didn't do it anymore. It seems like they've done it a lot the last 3. But as far as growth and those type things, Buck, on the defensive side specifically, what did you see or what did you want to shout out beyond what we've already talked about before we switch to some questions?
Well, I'd be real interested to see the PFF stats when they come out because I thought that Chiswick called a very aggressive game against Miami with sending extra people against the run blitzes, just regular pass blitzes, and he was just very aggressive, more aggressive than I've seen it. That's not typically his style, as you know. And as far as the defense, being different or looking better or all those kinds of things, I wonder how much of that is either the coaching staff has made a decision a week or 2 ago. Hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to concentrate on this side of the ball. We're going to stop the run, do the best we can in the pass game. We're going to put our corners on an island and let them play off, and they're going to do what they're going to do in the passing game, and we're just going to concentrate on stopping the run. It's either that or the players started buying into that. They've been preaching it to them all along, and the players have just now started to buy into it and say, yeah, okay, we get it. But I do think, even including the Virginia Tech game, there's been a slow movement towards a specific philosophy. And I'll be interested to hear Jason talk about, do you expect Chiswick to modify this going forward? In other words, like next week against Duke, regardless of what they're good at, could you see Chiswick say, no, you know what, we're going to concentrate on stopping the pass this game instead of the run? Or do you see him, because this is what he did in 2015, he picked the side of the ball. He picked to defend the pass in 2015 and 2016. Now he's choosing to run. Do you expect him to stick with that or modify it depending on what the opponent is good at?
Jason, I want to get your take on that certainly, but let me talk about Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com right fast. They're sponsors. We gotta show them love every time we do these podcasts. They always show us love. They're always showing you, the Carolina fan, love on East Franklin Street. Take care of them in person or online. They give you 10% off if you're a Carolina Inside or Inside Carolina Premium subscriber. Shout out to the 100 folks that are in this YouTube live.
Early morning.
Or early morning, no advertisement, no nothing. I just sneakily threw it up on YouTube Live. That tells me a couple things. That tells me people pay attention. That tells me that people are subscribed to the YouTube channel, and they got the alert that said we were going live. But also, they're great fans of Inside Carolina. So on the flip side of that, if you're friends of Inside Carolina, you got to be friends of Johnny T-Shirt. Take care of them online, premium orders, 10% off, all that good stuff. Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com. National Guys Pay the Bills for the audio version. It is the day after live. We'll be right back. All right, fellas, it's about 8:38 in the morning, Sunday morning. A couple late night ball game watching and commenting on after the Carolina game. But Jason, let's get right into this. I want you to answer Buck's question there. Then I've got a couple questions for our from the YouTube chat, and then we'll get out of here roughly 9 o'clock. But is this a Chizik thing where he's picked the side and he's going to stick with it, or do you think that adjusts game to game? I don't know if it's that simple with this unit to flip game to game, but what do you think? Mute. You're muted. Live.
I swear we're professionals, folks. So
Don't try this at home.
Yeah, exactly. It's a late night for some of us. Anyhow, so I don't think it's a like you said, it's not quite as simple as that. I think on the back end, we're going to see different things depending on who they're playing. I mean, you do not play Wake Forest the same way that you do Miami here. I mean, it's just a whole different ball game when you're playing against that team. So I think on the back end, they'll call games a little bit differently depending on what the strengths of that team are. But the thing that if this is actually the progress that it looked like on the defensive line, then it's going to look more like they're trying to take away the run for the rest of the year, just because suddenly they're having guys do their job on the front six. And then you're going to see teams have to labor a bit more to run the football, regardless of what they're doing in terms of bringing pressure or anything else, because you've got beef and you've got guys that are athletes that can actually stop. You should be able to stop the run with 6 in the box. I mean, that's the thing. That coming into the year, they thought that would be their strength. So I think they'll call the game the rest of the year on the, sort of on the basis of expecting some growth up front to continue for them to be able to limit the running game. But I think in terms of how aggressive they are with bringing pressure from different spots and, down the stretch, I mean, they brought both backers and, in most cases on that final drive, they brought, in some cases, a backer and a safety, or, there are a couple cases where they brought 2 backers and a secondary player. So, I mean, they definitely brought some pressure in this game. I think in certain cases, maybe they don't do that as much in the future against certain teams. You probably don't do that as much against Wake Forest, for example. Just ask Clemson. But I think otherwise, what we saw yesterday was largely what you expect to see and you hope to see the rest of the year. So, yeah, I think, but I think more than anything, the reason it looked so much more aggressive was that guys were actually getting there. Guys were actually doing their job up front, and defensive linemen were actually moving the line of scrimmage in the right direction. And that changes the game for you across the board on the back end.
It was interesting. They sent him off the corner, and I don't watch it as detailed as a lot of folks do, but I don't remember seeing too many corner blitzes this year that got home and all. Buck, I'm gonna call up a question. This one will be from. Let's see who I'm going to first. Let's go to Thomas Yancey in the YouTube chat, and we can tackle this question. Let's keep these answers tight and short as possible. Jason or Buck, get out your hourglass for Jason's answers. Here we go. Thomas Yancey, was Carolina run D that much better, or was Miami run game just weak? Buck, I'll let you start.
There's my answer. I've already got my answer in. You don't even need to turn it over. Yes.
Shortest answer ever. Buck, what do you think?
I think the D was that much better. Miami's had a pretty, they've run the ball pretty well this year. I think they were, they're like 38th or 39th in rushing offense, somewhere like that, nationally. So I think they've been running the ball pretty well this year. But 41 against North Carolina, 1.8, that's more than just, Miami having an off day running the ball. The North Carolina run defense was just that much better, I think.
All right, Jason, you already answered it in your shortest question ever. I think of Miami, and I think I heard Cristobal say it after the game. I mean, they were throwing it all over the field, having success, so just go to it. But there was some growth there for sure. This is a question you see a ton, and Jason, I'll start with you on this one. This is from Jamil Taylor. Here we go. Why are the DBs given so much cushion off the line? Look, they're 10 to 12 yards off. Jason, this is something that I'm also often miffed at, especially in short yardage situations. But what's your take here? I mean, that's just another Chiswick thing, right?
Yeah, I mean that some of that has to do with that just being what your other option is. So general rule of thumb is with corners, you either press, and there are a couple different variations of press you can use. You can mirror, you can try to get your hands on them. Or, there's a third that's kind of a combination. Or you can play off coverage. And off coverage, you don't want to play at 5 yards. That's no man's land. Because then you don't get the benefits of playing off and being able to read the stem of the receiver's route. Basically, depending on how a receiver releases. Does he release inside? Does he release outside? Does he release vertically? That allows you to read what the offense basically can do in terms of routes, because there's only a limited amount of time you have to run routes, unlike what you see in certain 7-on-7 stuff during the summer, where it seems like guys have an eternity to run whatever route they want. And then you see receivers getting wide open and, oh, look how great that those receivers are. Yeah. Pass rush is eventually going to get there. But here, what you're doing is when you play off coverage, the rule of thumb is you play somewhere around 9 to 12 yards off. And the reason for that is it's between 5 and 10 yards that the receiver basically has to declare what his route's going to be. And so if you're playing off, you can kind of get into a fast pedal. So just a little bit of a back pedal. You don't have to pedal too much. You can even slow pedal it. If you're fast enough corner, you can kind of slow motion your pedal as you're watching the receiver's routes coming out. And then if the receiver breaks off that route at 6 yards, you can drive on that ball, right? And try to get downhill and get there as the ball arrives and make a play. If it's a quick slant and the receiver on the third step breaks inside, you can now break on that and come downhill and try to break the ball up. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to put your players in a position on the outside when you're playing off coverage to where they can come downhill and play physical coverage against underneath stuff while being far enough off that if this guy is just releasing as a vertical release, when he gets to 5-6 yards and he's still pressing downfield and he goes to take off, you still have enough cushion. You got 5-6 yards of cushion that you now can pop your hips and you can make sure that you're taking away the vertical. So you're trying to play this in such a way that you can play underneath by driving on the ball and then play over the top by, using the benefit of cushion and making sure that receivers have a hard time getting over top of you. So that's why you do it. A lot of teams have had success with this over the years. Now, the thing is, in a modern game, if you have a really good quarterback and a bunch of wide receivers who don't drop the football and run good routes, eventually it can get difficult to play off coverage all the time because there's just enough space underneath that you can just sort of matriculate the ball down the field. But if you're Gene Chizik, that's what you want to force the defense to do more of. Are they going to make that contested catch every time? Are they going to catch the routine 7-on-7 hitch throws and slant throws when you're going to hit them as they're making the catch over and over and over again? Or are they going to make a mistake? Or is a ball going to deflect off the hand of a receiver and wind up in the hands of my defensive back? And, you see a lot of interceptions off coverage. A lot of people think that press coverage is going to result in more interceptions. That's not normally true. When you're playing off, you get, overthrows or any ball that goes off the hands of somebody or sails goes into a defensive back. So because you got guys that are always watching the quarterback in that case. So there are benefits to it. I think you need to be able to do both. And I think they've not done that good of a job in terms of technique playing off coverage this year, though some of that was a little better yesterday. So that's why they do it. That's the basics of the technique.
Yeah, a ton of interceptions come from tipping off receivers' hands, like you said, into the hands of other people. Buck, I'll get you this question, and I think this game might have been a definitive answer on it. Jeffrey Wang asks, you think we finally settled on a running back rotation for the rest of the year? I don't know about rest of the year, but DJ Jones had 2 snaps and George Pettaway had none. Caleb Hood and Amarion Hampton Buck ate up all the rest. What do you think there?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think they've decided on Hood and Hampton as the primary backs, and they're going to stick with that unless there's some reason to change. But I think Hood separated himself a little bit from Hampton yesterday, and Mac addressed it in the. I think Mac addressed a little bit of Hampton's. What he sees that Hampton's doing wrong is that Hampton doesn't run with his head up. He's trying to power over people, and Mac was talking about it in the press conference afterwards and said we need to teach him to run with his head up, and so he can see where he's going a little better than he has been doing. But I think it's great news if you can keep Caleb Hood healthy, and that's why you need some wood nearby to knock on, Tommy, because he does seem to have a tendency to leave the game with this this ailment or that ailment or whatever. So Hood, please stay healthy and continue to doing what you're doing, because it's great that he can run the ball and catch the ball. He's an all-round, 3-down back. So I think they'll probably stick with this rotation and run Hampton some, but unless there's an injury or something, I expect those two to kind of finish out the season.
And I think you're seeing with Hood and Hampton and I see some folks mentioning Pettaway in the chat. I think you're seeing to some degree the difference between a guy that's been in the program an extra year and younger talent. Hood is finally the light bulb is coming on for him in terms of how to read the blocks, how to run with his head up, how to run in balance with your eyes and your feet working together rather than, oh, I see it and my feet are in the wrong position to be able to make that cut. Right now you see with the freshmen, their timing is just off a little bit. Some of that has to do with, again, that I think Mac's completely right about Hampton in terms of not just not seeing because his head's down, but also his overall balance. He runs pretty top heavy. I mean, he runs with a lot of forward lean, and that's fine when you're trying to break a tackle. But if you run with that forward lean all the time, you're not quite in balance. And there's been some balance issues he's had where he's had I mean, how many times this year has he had a situation where he's broken through the line of scrimmage, and if he stays on his feet just a little longer, this turns into a long run. But he kind of ends up stumbling forward, and never quite recovers, and that's partly because he's just over leaning, and they've got to get him running with his feet under his body just a little more and trusting what he sees. And once that syncs up, I think he's gonna start really making things happen there. And I think Petaway just physically is a year away. He needs a year to get stronger.
And to your point, Jason, Caleb Hook didn't look this good last year when he got in games last year. He didn't have this kind of vision and running ability that he has this year. So a year makes a difference.
Absolutely. I put Mac's quote on Hampton in the chat there for everybody to look at if they missed it. He does. He's a plower. He likes just to run over people, and he's got to keep his head up. Somebody mentioned his Petaway. It's a red shirt after 4 games. We'll see. But I think, I think Caleb Hood, one thing I like, and Buck talked to this, and we're going to get out of here. I've got one more question for Jason. And then another comment I want to throw up, but I do want to ask this. It seems like watching this game and Buck, this is for you, the swings out of the backfield are something that they haven't done a lot. And we thought they'd do a lot with Petaway maybe early in the season.
5 yesterday.
Yeah, and those are backbreaker type plays. I mean, you can, especially the way May likes to survey the field and run through all those progressions. You mentioned it earlier. Talk about it a little more, how big a deal that is for this North Carolina offense, I think.
It's a huge deal because if you pretty much common sense that if you got a back that can carry the ball, for 10 yards, can catch a 10-yard pass, and can pass protect, then that doesn't give the defense any clue as to what the play call is going to be. If you got Petaway in there, you're kind of thinking, oh, okay, the play is going to go to the outside, or they're going to throw him the ball, or he's going to get in the run a route somehow out of the backfield. And if you have, I don't know, another back, there are plenty in the NFL that the only time you're ever going to see him in the game, like Jamal Williams at Detroit or whatever, the only time you're ever going to see him if it's like, first and goal from the 5, and that guy, what he's going to do. He's not going to be running out for a pass. But the versatility that a back like Williams gives you is what makes them so valuable. Guys that can catch the ball or run with it, and so the offense never has to tip his hand about what it's going to do.
All right, it is about 8:55. I like to do these in an hour. I need some more coffee this morning. But want to shout out, we've had 150 people in this chat. No advertisements for the live. So tell your friends, tell your family, get on here. On the Beat Live, 9 o'clock Tuesday night, Game Plan Podcast with Jason, myself, and Greg Barnes, 9 o'clock live on Thursday night. I'll get those numbers right. But let's end this with a couple of fun questions. This will be funny. And shout out to the folks that submitted them. But Nick, I'm going to throw up yours. Nick Whitfield asked Jason the following question. Jason, you still think my flag team could hang with Miami? I don't know if they could with Tyler Van Dyke playing like that, but, who knows?
Well, I mean, maybe his flag team's got some guys that can run. I mean, it depends on whether or not they can catch. So, run and catch. So, I mean, if it turns into a passing contest, that's home territory for the flag team. So, is this game being played in Miami is the real question. Because, if you're playing in front of no fans, I think the flag team might have a little bit more of an advantage there. So, we'll see. I'd have to see a little bit more about that flag team to be sure.
The shade is epic from Staples. Also, shout out. This is what it's all about, too. And this is not a question. This is a comment from a viewer. The 10% discount that I mentioned from Johnny T-shirts, worth it for premium membership, as much as I spend there, that discount pays for the Inside Carolina premium membership. That is it right there, folks. That's why you need to A, be an Inside Carolina premium subscriber, B, shop at Johnny T-shirt and save that money. Last question of the day, and Buck, if you want in on this, Jason wants in on this one. I'm going to shout out to Dodd, Dustin, whose last name shall not be mentioned on the Inside Carolina podcast. Why is our game clock management so bad? Can Sparky not get a tablet? Duke has a 1,000-page spiral binder. Jason, you wanted it, you got it.
The reason he can't have a tablet is because it's against the rules.
Is that simple enough?
That
Yeah,
sounds like it will be a problem.
Yeah, pretty simple. So you're not allowed to have any computing devices on the coaching staff on the sideline or in the booth in college. So this is not the NFL where everybody has, Surface tablets because of the fact that, you got 32 NFL teams with more money than they know what to do with. And you've got a sponsorship from Microsoft that wants everybody to use their Surface. So, in the NFL, and people are used to seeing this, you got these tablets on the sideline and people can do whatever. And the NFL can manage, they can see what all these guys are doing, right? They can go back and look like, are they trying to cheat? It's all networked. So in this case, there's no central organization to manage that in college football. And there are a lot of programs that can't afford to have, tablets on the sideline for different guys or whatever. So essentially, obviously Alabama could have, a tablet for each player, and, Texas could have a tablet for, each, not only each player, but, each cheerleader on the sideline to contribute and all of this. And Texas A&M, Lord knows what they'd do, in terms of, giving tablets to some very, very strange situations. But in college, you can't expect Akron to have, the budget to do that. And so they don't allow that. They have, everything has to be analog on the college sideline. So what Sparky did is they put together a really good notebook that has, an index that you can use based on situation and all of that. The thing is, they made the right call in each of those cases yesterday. So, it was the right thing based on time of game to kick the field goal at the end there. And that was the difference in the game. And then it was the right thing to go for it earlier. So, again, you can't really complain too much, in my opinion, about the clock management or end of game management in this one. I thought they did a good job.
Yeah, we've always banged on Sparky, and I must admit, it felt like I was watching my mom look for a buffalo chicken recipe when he was flipping through that thing. But to your point, they seem to have gotten it right. Buck, any closing thoughts? I mean, Carolina's 5-1, going to Duke and Durham. Duke, laid an egg against Georgia Tech. I'll let you close the show where you think this program is. 5-1's a big deal, especially when they were 6-7 last year. But what's next for this Carolina team?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I will say, though, that every single one of the games they played this year, except for the Virginia Tech game, they've all been struggles. I mean, even the Florida A&M game had its moments, of I don't know where this is going, just watching it. So they have really struggled, and they make it really hard on people, my age, that's susceptible to heart attacks, to watch these games, because you never know what's going to happen. It just no smooth sailing whatsoever. I was thinking back to 2015 when they had a 5-1 run going or whatever. Those games were really fun to watch, because they would just get out in front of people and hammer them, and it'd be over with by halftime. This year, not so much. It has been a struggle. Almost every game has been a struggle. So I'd like to see them get to the point where, and maybe it's the Duke game, probably not, but that the issue is not really in doubt for as long and as often as it was, last night. So that's where I'm at. But I don't want to get out of here either without talking a little bit about the onside kick and the officiating that went on for them to decide, can a guy who's out of bounds, actually influence the play? He's been running out of bounds for like 10 yards. And
like 4 yards out of bounds.
He's going to just jump up, and then all of a sudden he's not out of bounds anymore, so he can tip the ball back on the field of play. How long does it take to figure that out is what I'm interested in. What's your answers?
There's a picture.
We're talking about ACC officials here, right? Not just regular officials.
Yeah.
I think this is, and look, when they awarded it to Miami, I just laughed. I was like, they're going to overturn it. I mean, they got to overturn it. But good Lord, man, the dude is like running. Mac said it in his post game. I think Mac had to get out of the way because the Miami guys were running that deep on the sidelines. And the picture circulating on the message boards, there are at least 3 officials looking directly at the play, and they give the ball to Miami.
But here's the thing about this, and I noticed this yesterday actually in the night game as well. There were a few cases where I was watching the officials on replays. I was watching their eyes, and the officials' eyes are not in the correct place. So one of the things you have to do. So my dad was a Big Ten official for a number of years. And I, growing up used to hear him talk about training and all of this other stuff. So, I got a firsthand or secondhand exposure to this pretty early. One of the things that officials have to get trained out of is watching the football. And I've seen multiple examples of ACC officials this year where you have the one that stood out to me yesterday was a really bad holding call on the edge, where a quarterback broke, or actually in this case, I think it was a quarterback, but the ball carrier broke contain, and you had a wide receiver just latch on to the outside, hand outside, jersey stretch situation where you've got a guy, trying to get off the block and he doesn't. And there's an official who has the angle to look straight down the line at him. And then I watched the replay and he's watching the ball carrier. I was like, that's why that hold wasn't called. Here, I think all 3 of those officials are watching the football on the onside kick. And then they see the guy batted in, but they weren't watching his feet, which is their job. And look, I get it. It's hard. Like I have to discipline myself as an analyst to not watch the football all the time because it's hard not to do. That's where the action is. But your job as an official is to get your eyes to the right spot, and then you can make the right call. And the reason that they were having that conference is like, okay, who saw it? Was he inbounds? I don't know. And then, I guess you're trading recipes for the next like 4 or 5 minutes, maybe that buffalo chicken recipe you're talking about, Tommy. So at that point, it's going to take a while because you're going to have to go to the booth, and that never should have had to go to the booth. But a lot of it is, I talk about eye discipline from defenses, and quarterbacks, and this is a situation of eye discipline from officials who just got caught ball watching, all of them.
Yeah, it is not a good look. But you're right. There's so many plays that happen. Somebody mentioned Nesbitt's hold, pancake that turned into a hold, and things like that. But it's just if you're looking or watching this YouTube, go to the Inside Carolina Premium board. Another reason to be on there. Benny Hanna, funny, we're talking about recipes. Talked about shows the picture of that last play. Anyway, I think they rely too much on replay. I think replay has been wonderful to correct things, but replay has also been a detriment to folks doing their jobs because they know or they assume there's a backup. Anyway, I don't want to talk about refs. Sunday morning, get this podcast out to everybody. Buck Sanders, Jason Staples, I've been the host, Tommy Ashley. It's been the day after Miami edition, Carolina 27-24. Duke at 8:00 on next Saturday night. Wow. Should be rowdy over there in Durham and Wallace Wade. We'll see.
Might have more fans than Miami normally does at a home game.
The shade. I expect to walk outside and see a big FSU tomahawk shading my entire yard.
Don't mention FSU today.
Oh yeah, I'll let you go in peace. Buck, Jason, you guys appreciate it.
Thanks, Tommy.